Hello everyone, Anthony Cheer of the Bloody Point. So today I'll be taking a look at Bellwright, which is the new offering from Donkey Crew. Donkey Crew, as most of you will know, were the dev team behind Last Oasis. Last Oasis is a game that a lot of people have a lot of strong feelings about now, mostly due to how it ended up. It started off pretty promising. It had some very interesting design elements, a good concept, but for various reasons it just never really panned out. Certainly not something that would survive in the long term, but those of you who did play Last Oasis will recognize a lot of the elements of this new game, Bellwright. The soundtrack being one of them. The music, of course, is very similar. The combat system is also very similar. This, however, is not a multiplayer or PvP game. It is a single-player, possibly co-op game, survival game, very much store-driven. One of the comparisons I suppose you can make is, I would think it's most similar to Mount & Blade. In fact, Donkey Crew, of course, started out as modding for Mount & Blade, so the influences are definitely there. In fact, you could almost say this is going back to the roots, Last Oasis being somewhat of a deviation from that. So as I said, there are a lot of strong feelings about the game due to its connection to, all of the things that happened with Last Oasis. However, I decided to look at it to give it a fair shake. One other thing is the game is being published by Snail Games, which is another red flag for some people. But again, try to evaluate it on its own merits. So, as I said, it is similar very much to the Mount & Blade game in that you have to work your way up from very modest beginnings, and do so by gaining the trust of various people in the game, and recruiting villagers, starting your village, and etc., etc. There is a story in the game which is detailed through the opening animation. All in all, it's good enough, I think, very interesting, but remains to be seen how this would play out in the long term. So I'm going to feature gameplay for the first couple hours. That's what you're going to be seeing now. So as you can see, if you played Last Oasis, you'll be very familiar with the character model. The customization options are very limited. You don't, as far as I can see, even have the ability to change the color, which is a bit odd since it's one of the most simple and basic things to do, but perhaps that's a feature of the demo and something we'll be seeing in release. So start a basic character.
Long ago,
and here we
the
go with
legend
the
of the Bellwright echoed throughout the lands, yet none told the tale as you are about to hear it. In the woods, one fateful day, the royal twins set out for a hunt. Tragedy struck when an errant arrow claimed the life of the young prince. Our hero, a mere child, witnessed this fateful act. But the princess caught sight of our hero in the woods and accused the innocent child of the deed, casting false blame for her brother's demise. Our hero informed their father about the situation. Sensing the danger that was to come, the father warned the people of the impending storm. Enraged by his son's death, the king ordered the execution of every child resembling our hero, spurring fear and rebellion among his subjects. Thanks to the father's foresight, a triumphant uprising flourished, safeguarding children's lives. The father, along with a butcher and a shepherd, emerged as leaders, forging an unbreakable alliance. Yet betrayal tainted their unity, leading to an ambush where the father fell. A stranger saved our hero, whisking them away to the borders of the kingdom. There, they learned of their father's demise and the need for anonymity moving forward. With the alliance shattered, the kingdom entered a dark era. The vengeful king unleashed his fury on his own people, imprisoning and tormenting those who dared to rise against him. Years passed, and upon the king's demise, the princess ascended to the throne. But danger still loomed. and an assassin targeted our hero, finding them in their new life. Defeating the would-be killer, our hero discovered a contract, not naming them as the target, but their father. No longer safe and laden with questions, they embarked on a perilous journey, returning to their origins to unravel the mystery behind the contract. With purpose burning bright within them, our hero began a quest for truth, driven by destiny and bound by a legacy yet to be unveiled.
So, not too bad of a story attempt there. I have my own thoughts and feelings, perhaps theory on who might be behind the actual attack, but we'll leave that for later. So here we go, starting in basic survival game, fashion, with nothing to our name. We have to build ourselves up from the very basics, which includes, of course, gathering lots of hemp or fiber or some such, as I'm sure will be the case. Twigs, wood, whatever it is. The game does a pretty decent job of presenting information, I have to say. I like the design, it's very minimalist and clean. There are a few games lately in the past few years, even going back a decade, which have really nailed the UI UX experience. The Endless Space series is one of them, for example. New World did a decent job, and I think this is, from what I've seen so far, something that I like aesthetically. There are some issues with the interface, or perhaps more with the way information is doled out. Some things weren't obvious, but again, this is a demo. Perhaps that'll be refined going forward in development. So again, this being a single-player game and story-based, there's going to be a lot of reading. It's again, not similar at all to Last Oasis, so hopefully people appreciate that when they are looking at whether they want to play the game or not. You can see that every time there's any kind of new information, it's highlighted in the UI, which is useful to keep track of various things. So here we go. I have the world, I have a map, a nice little typical exclamation point indicator for where I need to go to follow the quest line. The map it's hard to get a sense at this point of how big it is, but since I'm running around everywhere, it's big enough. Again, though similar with Lost Oasis, we'll recognize the various equipment slots. It does use a similar system, it appears, for skills and attributes. You perform an action often enough and you gain a little progress, and then you can complete that particular level of that attribute or skill or whatever it happens to be, and then you get various bonuses from that. It turns out you can also level these up not just through activity but through the reading of books, which is similar to Mortal Online, I suppose, and other games. Those books can be purchased from NPCs or acquired through doing quests. There are a lot of quests in this game, something I realized as I played, that there's more than you could possibly really do. You have to pick and choose, and you don't necessarily know before speaking to the NPC what the quest will be, so there's a lot of running around, definitely. The quests also reset every day. The game has a sleep mechanic where, past a certain hour, I forget what it was, it might have been 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., you have the ability to sleep if you have a little shack or your base of operations that you can build, and when you sleep it just advances time forward to the morning, which causes all of the various quests and NPCs and so on to reset, giving you new quests. It's something that you don't have to do. I did stay up through the night a few times and I didn't notice any negative consequences of that. There does seem to be different behaviors in the world for mobs and NPCs during the night. So the player NPCs, the humanoids, are missing and not available or sleeping. Some of the mobs, such as wolves and stuff, are more active. So that's something you'll need to keep in mind when managing your time. So the harvesting, as you can see, they have tooltips indicating what you can and can't harvest and why, and if you need a tool. There are quite a number of different resources, and they give you some basic information on what it's for. One thing I don't like about the system that I noticed so far is there's no crouching. It's just seems something very basic, and especially given that they appear to be using the kinetic model from Lost Oasis, that it should be in there, but it's not. It's a design decision. I guess there's a reason for it. I don't know what it is. There are a few cases of where I would try to get to a particular location physically and simply couldn't do it because I couldn't crouch. Also to hide and so on. It's single player, so that, the crouching is probably really irrelevant in that regard, since the NPCs are either going to detect you or not based on their code, but still, it just doesn't feel right to not be able to crouch. Thankfully, you can at least jump, which is good, and it's useful. So here's an example of where there are pebbles on the ground, which I'm picking up. Pebbles are one source of rock. You can see that there's one in the back there. I would have crouched normally to get that, which I cannot do. You can see I'm actually checking the controls to make sure that I have not missed a crouch. I'm a little bit surprised that it's not there, but okay, be that as it may. You will notice also that my inventory is filling up rather quickly as I pick up these items. The things such as, wood and stones or rocks, they don't stack. So it's one slot per rock, which gets problematic very quickly. I can see how storage would be an issue, much as it was in Lost Oasis. And similar to Lost Oasis, you are able to build, or craft rather, like a backpack or a bag to have somewhat additional carrying capacity on your character. Fortunately, because things, larger things like logs, for example, for trees, as you can see, look, that's a problem. Larger things such as trees take up multiple slots, and it becomes unmanageable very fast, especially when you consider you need to collect multiple resources to build certain things, and if you don't have the space to carry them all, it's just not practical. So as I don't have a tool of any kind, my ability to harvest is somewhat limited. Certain nodes I have no way of making use of. I have to just pick stuff up off the ground. You'll also notice, as you see in a bit, that some of the resource nodes in the village periphery or inside the village itself have like an ownership to them. They cannot be harvested. I'm not entirely sure if that is based on my relationship in terms of my trustworthiness with the town or village, or if that's just a property of the rights. This game does have a kind of like a reputation system or a renown or whatever you want to call it. This settlement, this town, it doesn't know me. I'm a new person, and they will give out quests or permissions based on my standing with them. So I have to increase the standing by talking to people, by performing quests, and so on. The dialogue is all pretty straightforward. There is a story to the game, of course, a mystery. So in some sense, you do want to talk to everybody and pay attention and perhaps pick up, bits and pieces of the story. You don't know in advance, of course, how that's going to be doled out. So to err on the side of caution. Yeah, you too, buddy. The voice acting is, it's okay. It's a little questionable, I suppose, in some cases, but I also noticed that in the actual narration of the story, the typical kind of like movie trailer voice guy, some of the line deliveries were interesting. Some of the words, I would not have put the emphasis in those spots, but hey, it's not terrible. I've seen, or rather heard, a lot worse, to be sure. Okay, so here we have something I mentioned earlier, the books. These books will give you access to particular technologies or the ability to build things. I suppose it's similar to tablets in a way, with Lost Oasis. You could see the prices. Prices were quite extreme, so you're going to need a lot of coin. I did find a kind of funny way to generate some coin. There's perhaps ways to exploit the system that I haven't tried, but have kind of theory crafted, so I'll have to give that a shot after I go through this first playthrough. But this is the primary quest giver, so he's going to inform me of what I need to do in terms of, getting the villagers to trust me and to really start my journey here. The location I'm at is a village, obviously an NPC village, and part of the game's point is for you to create your own village, to recruit villagers, to build up a workforce, and including fighters, etc., and to use that to advance through the game. It's not really clearly delivered in terms of the game's information, where you should build or what the elements associated with that are. So I'm just going to go out somewhere in the map in a location that seems to be topographically good, and go from there. So you can see, like, the town it's pretty nice. Like, the graphic style, again, very similar to Lost Oasis. I'm not sure what engine they're using. The character models certainly have the same animations. A lot of the music is similar. The combat system is definitely, it seems identical, again, except for the aforementioned lack of crouching. The graphics, they do the job, and as there is a day-night cycle, there's some nice effects from that as well. The sound design is very good. The game's controls, like the movement, feels pretty decent. That is something that was very well done in Last Oasis. In fact, if you were good at that game, not just the combat, but just how the movement worked as well. Of course, you had the grappling and the wingsuits, etc., and the vehicles. But you could do some good stuff with movement in that. And even though you're limited to, 2 dimensions, in this case, you can't fly or grapple around. You can't even crouch. You can still, it seems, move around pretty well. There are some issues I noticed with the terrain, where you're literally trying to step over something that's a couple inches high and you can't. That's a problem. Okay, so trying to decide where to build my village. Notice the large body of water there. Water seems like a good thing to be near. It's not clear exactly what the hostile NPCs are going to be like. This story delivery does mention bandits. In fact, the village itself seems to be under the control of a bandit warlord or something of that nature. So there are bandits out there. So I got to be careful about where I build. There are some comparisons, even though from my understanding, the developer doesn't like to even mention the game, but there are some comparisons that can be made. Okay, so here I notice, let me interrupt or interject, I noticed that they buy items, so I'm looking at the things they buy. They're going to buy peasant pants, and I start with peasant pants. So I take them off, I don't look naked, that's good. This is a gamer moment right here. Anyone who's played an MMO will understand this thing. So I sell my pants, get my 45 coin, now I can afford to buy a weapon and or tool, which I was without. So I would recommend this. The actual gear, the peasant clothing that I had, didn't appear to really make much of a difference in terms of, like armor class or anything like that. I have no idea if there are environmental effects. I do not see anything other than hunger and stamina, of course. You do need to eat, but that's, not going to be impacted by my clothing. So here we go. Yeah, very similar to Lost Oasis. It's pretty, it's the same animation. Let's be honest. It was fine, and so there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, kudos to them for repurposing something that worked. Something that some developers do, it seems, from game to game, is they feel the need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because a game failed doesn't necessarily mean that all of the ideas from the game were bad. People definitely do carry on game elements from success to success, but they don't seem to do that for failures. So as you can see, there is a night cycle, as I mentioned, and there's a timer in the lower right indicating the time of day, so it's getting dark. The lighting, I tend not to artificially adjust my lighting. I like to see what the game's designers intend me to see and not see what they don't want me to see. You do have the ability to craft a torch, which would, improve your visibility, of course, make it easier for others to see you. Given that this is a PvE game, I don't know how problematic that is, but, it's not dark enough for me to need it. So, questing again, very basic. You go to the NPCs with the question mark above your head, exclamation for main story or turning in. It seems like you can have almost unlimited number of quests going at once. You can go to the journal and it will indicate, which quest, if you track them, which quest is active and where they are located, the NPC or the objective, and also tell you what you need to do. So that system is very basic, but it works fairly well. Here you can see the journal, and I have my 2 quests, one of them indicating I need to investigate a local point of interest for information to return to this fellow, and then the other is kind of like the main story quest, I guess, which is to build your village. So I'm going to just explore a little bit here. As you saw earlier, a lot of these resource nodes are in the town's sphere of influence, and they cannot be harvested. You will notice that I'm not that far outside of town, and I'm still able to collect things, so it's not a really big limiting factor. The world isn't that big that it's going to be a problem, but it is something to note. You need to think about, like all these types of games, you need to think about what quests you take and what resources or items it requires and where those are located, and plan your pathing accordingly, so you don't spend a lot of time running around wasting energy, literally wasting energy in a case of a game like this, a survival game where you're using up your stamina and, more importantly, your food as you run around. So here we have our first food item, a mushroom. The game does a nice thing where every time you interact with a new thing or discover some new information, it'll show up in your codex. You can click it and get some basic information about it. In some cases it will have details about how it can be used. Others, it's more flavor text. Irony not intended. So the mushrooms can be eaten raw. I did not compare how much they satisfy you between their cooked state and their raw state. Like in a lot of games, food of course fills up your food bar or meter, but it will also cause you to heal a certain amount, and more complex foods will cause you to heal more. As you can see, I'm running into a problem already with the storage. The inventory challenge is something that a lot of games kind of require you to deal with. I understand it somewhat more in terms of a competitive PvP game, but for a PvE game, it seems a little bit, sure, you want to account for realism somewhat. You can't expect someone to be carrying around, 100 pounds, 200 pounds of things and like huge bulky trees and so on. But you need to give people tools to get around that. So an example of that is a really, really old game called Worm Online, where you could chop down a tree and you could have like a giant felled tree, and depending on the size of the tree and your attributes, which dictated your carrying capacity, you could carry like a whole felled tree on your person, which of course is not terribly realistic. However, in terms of giving you the ability to get around some of these issues and the limits that the game did have, is you could build a cart, you could pull a cart to increase your capacity, and then if you needed even more and you wanted to move faster, you could hitch animals to a cart. You could build, small boats, larger boats, boats with huge cargo holds. Like, they really did a great job of allowing the player to work within the system to varying degrees of scale. And the limits are there to keep it realistic, but they give you the things that you need to work practically within those limits. A game like this, of course, is much more simple. It's a survival game, so they're not going to go into that much, involved of a system, but I have to make decisions now about what I keep and what I throw away. Rocks presumably will be available everywhere, so I could probably safely throw those away, but of course that's not always the case. You will find yourself in some locations looking for the very thing that you a few minutes later dropped on the ground and discarded. Again, I don't really know necessarily what I'm going to need the logs for. I'm also kind of testing it, so I want to see how much space it takes, so I did pick one up. Okay, I do probably need to be getting on to the quest, so I will focus on that in a bit. At the moment, I can build the shack and the basic campfire. Each of those requires a very small amount of resources, so it probably won't be an issue in sourcing that locally, so I don't necessarily have to be carrying this stuff around. The carrying capacity perhaps may go up based on some of these attributes. I don't believe I noticed that when I moused over everything, but if that were the case, it would be certainly good. And as mentioned, of course, you can craft a bag which you can wear to increase the capacity. That can be unlocked, as I found out, by doing a quest, talking to a particular NPC, doing a fetch quest for them, and then they give you they unlock the technology. So very, very basic MMO or survival game stuff. So I do have the quest active here, the indicator on the interface and their little mini map or radar map on the lower right. Another kind of UI or mechanics thing I didn't like about the game so far is that you cannot resize that mini map. At least I didn't see any way to do it. You know, you can have the map open, but I mean that makes you very vulnerable to attack, especially since these mobs and the NPCs, especially animals, they path around, they wander around. In fact, I suffered an ill fate as a result of that very thing, somewhat later in the video. But yes, you know, resizing is good. I don't know why you wouldn't add that at least to a little. You know, you don't have to make it extreme, the options, but just give you some ability to customize that. So here we have our first POI. Pretty nice little design there. Have an interactable, which prompts the codex information, and then I can go to it and gets what they call folklore here. It tells me a little bit about the town, gives me some information. Again, it's not possible at this point to know what info is useful or not to the primary quest line, but certainly anything that goes in the codex I assume is going to be of some value. Okay, that one's done. Next up, I need to build my shack and my basic campfire. I have to decide where I want to do that. Not knowing much about the map at this point, or where I'm going to be needing to be primarily, I'm going to just pick an area that seems somewhat safe but also you know, useful. Since I'm not just building like a field camp, I'm actually supposedly starting a village. It would make sense that you need a lot of space to do that in, and you're going to want to be near a road probably. So I'm going to keep that in mind. So I want a spot that's scalable. It's good to be a little camp, perhaps hidden, because I don't know how aggressive the mobs or NPCs are going to be, but I'm also going to want to have a location that's useful to me in the context of, you know, running a village. I don't know how that system works as of yet, so we're just going to pick something that seems to work for everything. As you can see, a lot of harvestable nodes in some spots. In other spots, there aren't quite as many nodes. You will notice that I do, in some cases, especially given the storage or the carrying capacity limits, I do need to be very careful about what I pick up, and to avoid, you know, running around too much. The village renown system will, as you'll see as I turn in quests, increase my standing, which will unlock new quests, and through some of those quests, that's how you unlock new technology. So if I had not done those quests, I would not have been able to do certain things, build other things. It is, you know, nighttime technically. It's almost 2 a.m., so the quest guys are asleep. I don't have my little camp built, so I can't advance time by sleeping. So I pretty much just have to wait it out, which is fine. The nighttime, you know, the speed of time's advance is fairly quick, so it's not too bad. As mentioned earlier, the world design, you know, the graphics, the visuals, it's pretty nice. It's, at least for this particular area, it does fit the theme very well. Yeah, voice acting, as I said, sometimes a little questionable. So yes, NPC's not here, so I'm going to just do a little exploring. The game does.
Don't even think about reaching for that sword, traveler. We outnumber you.
Okay, I wasn't thinking about it, but thanks for the warning. So the game does have, as I said, you know, this kind of smallish map, but it does appear that perhaps out in the demo, or rather in the non-demo, a lot of that would be unlocked. So I'm going to just run down to an area that seems suitable for building. You can see some wildlife here, rabbits running around. Anyone who played last Oasis will be familiar with having to chase down fast-moving little mobs for resources. It does seem that there's archery in the game, so that hopefully will make it a little easier. So the icons on the map, you can see now I have these 3 crossed swords indicating bandit camps, and I have a quest giver up ahead. The bandits and mobs will show up both on the map and on the radar as little red diamonds. You can mouse over those diamonds to see what type of hostile it is, whether it's a dog or a wolf or a bandit, etc. So that's a nice feature. You can see a couple of them ahead here, so I'm going to avoid them. I don't know at this point, what their relative strength to myself is. I have sold my pants and bought myself an axe, so technically I could defend myself, but it's hard to say. Similar to that other game, which I guess from this point on we shall leave unnamed, but we all know what we're talking about. It does have a directional combat and directional blocking system, so if you are highly skilled, you can, get through an encounter with an NPC taking no damage. The issues come more with, groups of them, multiple and so on. So in this case, there are a couple, not just one, so I'm going to leave that be and just avoid them. One thing I wasn't sure about is, how close do the NPCs need to get to you to aggro? Coming up, you'll notice I get fairly close to some humanoids and they don't seem to notice me. Again, I cannot crouch, so I can't hide from them. You can try to hide in bushes. I don't know if that actually works or not. So I'm going to try and find a secluded place. There's a spot between those 2 tree lines. There's creates a choke point, or at least it looks like a choke point on this map. So I'm going to target that as my building location. It's also not too far from a road, so if I expand my little place, I can make use of the road. You will see, not necessarily here, but it does come up. You can grapple. You can kind of vault yourself up. So that's useful. That's needed in some cases. Okay, so I get really close to this guy and I made noise, and he did not react at all. So that's good, I guess, in this case. I don't know if the time of day has any part in that. He, it's dark. Maybe he did not see me. He, quote unquote. Maybe the code isn't such that it's supposed to. There's quite a big trail of them, actually. Those ones, for some reason, do not show up on my map, even though they are closer than the thing that's, red to my flank there. Perhaps they're not hostile. I don't really know. I don't get close enough to tell. There's a symbol you can see on the ground, this kind of glowing thing. I didn't know what that was, but it turns out it is kind of like the loot from a dead mob. It's what they call remains. Of course, I have my carrying capacity issue, so I'm going to dump the log, get some slots back, and I have myself some pelt and fangs. The fangs, it turns out, as I learned later, can be turned into an NPC for coin, so that's a good money maker in theory, that you can just do over and over, assuming that you have wolves available. There are a lot of different things you can turn in. Some are even harvestables, so you could, if you wanted to, grind out coin in any amounts, simply just through doing that, which is a good thing. Okay, here we have some more dots where I was thinking to build, so that's going to be a no-go. Even if I were to kill them, it's most likely they would just respawn, and if I've expanded into that area, that could be bad, so we'll just pick something not so much based on the map, but based on the terrain. Very important, never confuse the map for the terrain. Here we have kind of like a tree line and a nice big rock. In survival games, stuff like this, especially if your settlement isn't gonna, or your spot isn't gonna show up on the map, you always want to use landmarks for identifying the location so you can find your way back to it. This may also help in terms of defense. The rock is providing some concealment from the roadside. So I have the option to build the basic campfire or the shack. I will build the campfire first. Let's see, the placement system is decent. It allows you for rotation and, moving it around while you're stationary. So as I found, the placement is actually pretty forgiving in terms of its collision with the terrain, certainly more forgiving than other games that allow you to do such things. I'm playing PlanetSide 2, as you may have noticed, and it has the construction system, and that is very much an example of a game that is unforgiving in that regard. So I am going to drop my campfire plot down here, and then we're going to need to build it out. So the game uses a system similar to that other game, which you will be familiar with if you played it, whereas you have the resources and you kind of interact with certain spots on the kind of ghost image of the structure that you're building, and you add on the different components one at a time, and it will, update the visuals involved. It's a pretty good system, I have to say. There is a element to it as well, that if you're building a building and it takes a large quantity of resources, you can put all the resources in an attached receptacle to the building plot first, so you have to carry them on you, and then you can just kind of like pass them from one to the other by interacting with the points. Again, the codex is being updated. There is weather in the game. It's not clear what effects that have, if any, on anything beyond visibility, but it is a nice touch. The environment sounds are pretty decent. Okay, so I have a campfire. The campfire is, establishing the actual temporary camp, which seems to be associated with multiple mechanics that I don't yet know exactly how they work, but they track things such as available food, the workforce you can have, etc., etc. You can cook here, of course, and this is a pretty cool little system, is that if you interact with the sticks, and you can cycle through the different food types, so depending on where you are, some will be more readily available than others. In this case, I have mushrooms nearby, so that's good. You can't eat them raw, but cooked seems to be preferable. I cannot craft using this particular thing, other than food, of course, but there are other things I can build which allow me to craft. So this seems like a decent spot in terms of its location. Again, close to the road, which will be good if I need to expand it into a full-size village. Easy to find, and certainly a lot of available wood around. There is a kind of a rock face not too far away, so in theory I should be able to get stone as well. There aren't that many plants of the type, hemp and so on, for fiber and things, so you'll see that I will need to range somewhat further afield to get some of the things I want. There are berries here and whatnot. It seems that nodes do come back, but they do take a bit of time. I'm not sure how much time exactly, but just keep that in mind when you're harvesting. Berries can be eaten raw, of course, so it's a good food source. You can see that my campfire has light associated with it, so there is some visibility with that. Again, it is not something that is a huge issue because it's PvE, and the mobs don't seem to be attracted to those things. You'll notice that I'm kind of in the middle of a bunch of animal mobs, wolves and a couple dogs, so that can be a good or bad thing depending on your confidence and your ability to actually kill them. The issue with a survival game, of course, is if you die, you are going to spawn somewhere else. If you're not at the location where your spawn is, then you will drop everything you're carrying. It's not clear to me at this point what actually happens upon death. In that other game, you died, your loot would drop on the ground and you could recover it. Hopefully that's the same here, but that remains to be seen. Okay, so let's get some mushrooms, see if we can get those cooking. The campfire requires the actual food item as well as wood for fuel. much like Conan Exiles, I suppose, but a little more simplistic. There we go, some information about the food. It indicates some details. Okay, there we have a wolf. Now, it's not aggroing me just yet, so it can get somewhat close, but I want to be very careful because, I really don't know. It's not like some games where it tells you with an indicator color coding how dangerous a mob is. So a wolf could be easy or it could be hard. No idea. I'll have to find out eventually, but we're going to leave that for a later time. Okay, so I have the mushroom. I stick the mushroom on the stick, and then after a little bit of time it will cook. So that's great. Okay, so there was an audio cue indicating the wolf aggroing me, and now we're in combat. So I'm not doing a very good job of hitting him. The attack animation is it's good when you're fighting humanoids if you're doing directional blocking attacking, but I've always found that small mobs that are not humanoid are problematic. That was the case in the other game as well, but I do eventually figure it out. It's been a while since I played that game, so directional combat is something that is common in a lot of games now, but in the past it wasn't as common. Mount and Blade was one of the biggest ones that did it at the time. Okay, so here we go. We'll get this guy done. So, little instructions regarding death, or some information regarding death. I've killed the mob, and it has that similar remains thing that you saw. It is a different color. I noticed that the previous one was not the same color. Perhaps when you kill something versus when something dies to other mobs, it's color-coded. So that's unclear. I have taken some damage. You can see that I'm near death. So I'm going to eat one of my cooked mushrooms, and you notice that I gain a health regen effect for a period of time. So that's not a lot of health. I'm going to have to eat a lot of these roasted mushrooms to get my health back. That's but here we go. Now, before I fully regain health, I have another mob, and I kind of get hung up on the interface. The mobs kind of disengage and re-engage. I'm not sure what the code is doing for that, but I did notice later that you can kind of like kite them and they will lose interest. They don't leash. They do leash eventually. They don't chase you forever. Okay, so here I've died. I do not see a container on the ground. Like, I don't see my stuff. I don't know if that's because I haven't released yet or what. I do get a new kit of clothes. I have my pants back. So, there's a little bit of a exploit perhaps, as I suppose I could just keep dying with no real consequence and selling my pants or my clothing. I'm not going to do that, but maybe the devs might want to look at that if that's actually a thing, because gamers will actually take advantage of that, especially if it gives them an advantage. Okay, so I'm back in the town. The campfire is not a respawn point, but this is just as well. I have a quest to turn in here, so I'm going to reactivate track that quest and find the NPC, and let's see what it gives me. Again, the visuals in the game are pretty good. The sound is pretty good. Performance-wise, not that I've seen a lot of mobs on screen at once or anything like that, but there are a couple of hitches here and there, but overall it seems to be well done. Okay, so get a dialogue. I turn in my quest. You get some options here. I've noticed that they are different. It's unclear if there's a right or wrong choice. So here I've gained some trust with the location. There's a progress bar for trust, which you can see by accessing the larger map. And you go through different levels of standing, which unlocks various things. I'm going to pick up another quest here. You can pick up, like I said earlier, it seems almost an unlimited number of quests. I don't know if that's something you'd want to do. Certainly it can be more efficient if you find that you're running to a distant area of the map and it turns out there are multiple quest objectives in that location. So, picking up a lot of them is probably okay to do, but it's unclear if there's a limit. but I'm going to keep it kind of like at a manageable amount. So here we have a book. It's called the Knowledge Book. It doesn't seem tied to any particular, school of knowledge or attribute. It's just a consumable. So I can choose any one of these things that I want to gain some points in and use it and then gain those points. So I have to make a choice. What would be the best at this point? I consider archery, but I don't know. It's probably something that I'll want to explore a little later. For now, I'll just stick with something basic. We're gonna go with the old standard, more damage and HP. I considered speed, but nah, damage and HP. So you see, I have 10 of 100, and then I used the book and it gave me 1, which is not a lot. I was thinking it might go up, in tens at the very least, if not 100, but that seems to be not very efficient. You certainly wouldn't want to be running around spending 5 or 10 minutes doing a quest to get 1 book to give you 1 point of skill when you could do an activity, gain resources, and also gain the skill at the same time. So I don't know how efficient that is. Getting them for free is great, but otherwise, probably going to pass on that. Not going to grind out books. Okay, so I have more quests I need to do. I need to build a shack. I need a certain resource for that, which I can acquire in this location. So I need to find some that's not, within the city limits that I can actually harvest. This is flax, which we need. So here, I'm not that far out of town, and here's some flax that I can harvest. There was also some near my base location, which I could have used, but we're going to just pick this up because I'm here already, and then if I go back there and I need more, I can harvest the stuff closer to my base of operations. So I need 8 of these. Carrying capacity coming into play. The game probably has methods beyond the backpacker bag to alleviate the storage issues. It's going to be a question of what kind of containers can I have, how much storage can I get, how much space do I need for those storage. Some people are like pack rats, and they pick up everything. I kind of do that, but just a little bit more moderated. But yeah, you never know what you're going to need, and you never know what you're not going to be able to harvest locally, so you want to have a lot of stuff. So let's see, I have 9, but I'm going to just pick up a couple more since I'm here. This is, as you could see in the lower right, day 3. So day 3 of day-night cycle. I don't know if these quests will expire if I pick up a bunch and I don't do them. I also don't know if the primary story quest, has timed events as well. And the game storyline indicates that an assassin was sent to kill what I thought was me, but it turned out it was actually to kill my father, who's supposed to be dead. So presumably, since that assassin was himself killed, there will be kind of like a follow-up on that. They'll send another one, or there might, somebody be coming here, representative of the crown to collect taxes. Who knows? So it's possibly the case that there's some time pressure. That's not conveyed necessarily through the story or the UI, but I don't want to linger too long on exploration. We're just going to collect what we can. Of course, I lost my axe to the wolf. I could sell my pants again and buy another one, but it does seem that there are smaller harvestables for getting wood. So you have actual wood directly dropped in the ground. You have these little small trees called saplings, which you can harvest. You don't need to chop down a full tree and to get logs to get wood, so that's good. The game does seem to have a reasonable amount of resource nodes. Other games recently, New World being an example, they had some instances with when they were highly populated, where an entire area would be bereft of resources for a considerable amount of time. In fact, back in the old days of that game, the pre-beta or the early beta, before it became a PvE focused game and it was PvP focused, you'd actually have a lot of fighting over resources, which is something I find so few games get right or even bother to focus on at all. Like, competing over resources is one of the most natural things to have in a PvP game, and it's something that, you know, not just generates PvP, but it also impacts the strategic element. You know, you can starve out a rival group of resources, especially if you're starting out building at the same time. If I go to a particular area and I harvest all the trees around them, all the iron, all the stone, etc., then they don't have it to build with, and it's a really good natural thing to have in a game. This, of course, being a PvE game, it's not a factor, but it is something to note just from a design perspective. The density of harvestables and their location, and incorporating that into the overall gameplay. So I'm going to just collect a little bit more here before I head back to my my little plot. You can see that I'm like walking up to all of the different things, even though they don't have the interactable on them. That's kind of just an inattention on my part, not realizing yet that you can actually tell. Yeah, I'm going to avoid those guys. You know, these bandits here are very close to town. It was probably not a bad idea, before I filled my inventory again, to just go engage them, to get a sense of what their strength is like, how their combat mechanics, how sophisticated they are for like these low-level mobs. Since if I died, I'd be respawning very close and I wouldn't have lost anything since my inventory was empty. I didn't do that, but that's something I would probably recommend people who start the game to do. Maybe sell your pants a few times. Okay, so I have my stuff that I think I'm going to need, and I'm going to head back down to my plot. There is a quest on the road on the way, which is the merchant whose wagon did not arrive on time and presumably is broken down on the road. Most likely, given the mention of the bandits in the story and the amount of bandits that are wandering around, he was probably attacked by bandits. In fact, I can see somebody on the road up ahead, and indeed it is a bandit at the wagon site. So again, not having engaged the bandits yet, I don't know how strong they are. I don't know how hard of a fight it would be. There's no time pressure for the quest right now, so I'm just going to go around them and go back to my plot and just get that kind of built up, at least to the point where I am limited based on the technology. As you saw in the interface, there are a lot of different little buildings you can build, and some of them require you to unlock them first, and I haven't unlocked very many of them, so we'll just build up the ones I have and see how that goes. You can tell right away that I'm doing a lot of running, but the world isn't that big, so it's not like a huge investment of time. So I don't expect, it may be the case, I haven't actually looked, I don't expect there would be the need for mounts. Perhaps they will include them, but I'm doing a pretty decent job of just getting around on foot. I did notice that there are fast travel options which are unlocked through building certain things and based on the locations and so on. So that's good. Again, it's not a PvP game, so I have no problem including fast travel in PvE games. It's not really going to impact the gameplay very much. So let's see. I was somewhere around here, near the road. It does turn out that there are little NPC vendors in the world as well. There's a couple, you can see the question marks indicating quest givers. Some of those are also vendors, and you can do fetch quests for them over and over to get coin. In fact, it seems to be the case that it's not something you can do over and over necessarily. There's a limited number of items that they will sell. So for example, there's a nearby vendor who sells rope, but he will only sell 2 or 3 a day. I assume that they will only buy a limited number of things as well, but of course you can just advance time and do it again and again as needed. Okay, so there is something near my camp, probably one of those wolves. I'm also looking out for a bag from my death. I'm pretty much right where I died and I don't see it. So either it never dropped as it appeared when I first started, or it expired. I suspect it just doesn't drop. I'll have to test that theory closer to town. But yes, we're going to build the shack. The shack is the next item in the build menu. It's, as I said, a pretty forgiving placement system. I do like that about it. The aesthetics are pleasing as well. So again, following the previous format, I have the individual build points. I can put the resources on them one by one, or I can also put them in that receptacle on the right that you can see, which will just hold all of the building materials, liberating them from my inventory and allowing me to, just go through the different points. The model of the structure changes based on every individual item's placement. That's pretty cool. Again, similar to the old game. It has some nice feedback, audio-visual feedback, which is appealing. The actual model, it has different stages of development. So there's kind of like the foundation, the outer shell, and then there's kind of like a covering that you're putting over it. It's all very detailed and well done. But I do have a wolf there. I'm not going to mess with him, so I'm just going to collect a few more resources if I have the space for them. The funny thing is, you can crouch when you're harvesting, right? But you can't manually crouch for whatever reason. Again, really weird choice. Even if you don't need it in game, just the fact that it removes the choice from the player and doesn't allow you will anger, frustrate, or annoy a lot of gamers. I think developers need to keep in mind always that choice is good, even if it's not crucial or required to complete your in-game tasks. You should never remove something, having to do with choice from the player for no reason. Okay, so inventory's full. I'm going to go back to finish building. Dumping the items in the side will help me liberate some of the spots. I suppose one of the reasons they have this particular method is not just to liberate your inventory space, but supposedly this can be co-op. So you could conceivably have multiple players contributing to the pile next to a structure's build site and be efficient in that regard. So yeah, interacting with all of the things. Again, that game that shall not be named, very, very similar. One of the game's kind of cool or nice elements, so it's good to see that used here. The collision doesn't seem to be active until it's complete, so I could walk through this whole structure. It's quite involved. I haven't counted how many individual interactions there are, but it's a lot. Certainly more than the wood. Not each of these things is taking one wood. So it's kind of a interesting choice in terms of realism. For sure, I did not carry this much wood to build this structure, how much wood it would be. But it's also not just saying okay, 4 woods, with no granular level detail builds a shack. It's dividing it up this way. So it's a decent choice. I respect it. Okay, so here we go. Different stages. Now we're going to be working on the roof. I don't remember picking up palm fronds and such, but okay, we'll roll with it. Looks good. I like it. Well done. Bravo. Okay, almost finished. Ta-da! Alright, so as you can see, there's a bunch of interactables. I have 2 on the inside and what I think is 1 on the outside. The 2 on the inside are kind of like a bedroll for sleeping, which can be used to log out in advanced time, as I mentioned. And then you have a chest for storage. I don't know if the size can be changed, but I'm very happy for additional storage, so I'm going to unload my stuff into there. The storage is, as you saw earlier, not always single slot, so things like logs or rope will take multiple slots. And here we have the bedroll. It won't let me sleep in advanced time because it's too early in the day, so that makes sense. Oh, there's the wolf friend again. And then I have a workbench, which I think only has 1 interactable, but it actually has more than 1, but I don't notice. So that's all for the first hour. If you watched this whole way, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will be posting more shortly. More of Bellwright coming soon. Thanks for watching.